Chapter 5. Momo placed in Robert's hand a piece of parchment with a crude blood-stained drawing of 4 areas, each with a strange name under it he hadn't heard of. In the fires of the fight, Robert fled from the city, wielding not his butcher's knife, but a pair of pitch-black knives encrusted with symbols that glowed a purple color, a cloak, and a pouch holding what little food he had left in his house. He headed east, to the sandy area indicated by his mother's drawing, the one with the knife symbol and the number 1. When Robert reached it, he found one man who did nothing but held out his hands, and Robert placed the only thing of value to him, the dark daggers in his hand. The man began to tell Robert of what he must now do to aid in the war. He must travel to the 4 masters of the Wynn province to learn their magic and skill if he is to lend his hand to the cursed war. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. After 5 years of training to become an assassin, Robert was now 17 years old and incredibly powerful. The master, Shock, who had taught him, told him his time was now up with him, and that he would have to progress to learn archer. Shock took Robert's daggers, to which the handles began to glow bright and molded together to form a large sheen bow, to which he strung a thick strand of his own hair. Shock handed it back to him and said, "Even the worst experienced soldiers must start from scratch when learning a new mastery." And it was true. Robert was not equipped to deal with any of the creatures that faced him. He'd never even fired a bow. Robert began his journey further south, past the blizzards into a pocket of land he'd never seen on any map, the bow symbol with the number 2 accompanying it. It was home to only one building, a large mansion, to which a man stood with his hands outstretched as Robert approached. Just like 5 years previous, Robert handed him the bow, to which he said, "I am Male, master of archery. Let us begin. Just as you progress, as does the war." To which Robert spent a further 5 years mastering the art of crafting and firing arrows in any situation, and learning the magic surrounding the bow. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. In this time, Robert also learnt about the areas he trained in. Male was incredibly spiritual. The mansion in which he lived was also a house to many spirits which found Male to heal them. Robert learned about the other side and how many of the fallen soldiers returned cursed to fight on the other side, to which Robert secretly hoped he was able to communicate with his deceased mother. However, Robert never expressed these desires. Male told Robert that the time had come for him to learn some magic that involved no physical weapon to hit them with. Robert handed over his bow, to which a familiar glow transformed it into a pure black rod with the same purple markings around them. Robert looked at the old frayed map to see the next area with a single line in it and the number 3. Except this time, he knew what the area was. It was the forest he passed through when he was 12 years old to get to the desert to begin his training. He barely made it. For the first time since he began his training, Robert was filled with fear. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. The forest was full of spiders and poison, and the thought of poison always reminded him of the time well, never mind that. Robert set off to the forest wielding a stick that was about as much use as a hollowed-out pumpkin. He couldn't for the life of him make it work. Regardless, when he reached the forest, he entered a mystical village suspended in the trees, lit by hanging lamps, to which the familiar sight of a man with his hand outstretched grasped the wand Robert laid in his hand. "You are halfway through your journey. Do not let frustration warp you. Let us begin the hardest of all arts," were the first words Eth, the magical master, had ever said to him. And it was certainly true. Wand lore had not come too easily to him, as knavery and archery had. However, the arts of the magic eventually flowed through him over the coming 5 years, to which point Robert was now 27 years old, and beginning to wonder if he would remain young enough to fight in the war. Eth told Robert it was time to move on, and transformed his wand into a final form, a giant black spear. Even his mature eyes gleamed at the sight of it. The spear was the weapon of Troms, the greatest fort man had ever created. End of chapter 8.